What's up everybody, Commander Sanctum here, and today we have a brand new deck tech using Tifa Lockhart. Tifa is a 1/2 human monk for 1 and a green that has trample, and, whenever a land you control enters, double Tifa's power until end of turn. A creature that doubles its power when you play a land, in green no less? Sign me up. As everyone knows, green is the king of land ramp, and Tifa's ability plays directly into that. For this deck, we'll be playing a form of a Voltron deck, but instead of using enchantments, counters, or equipment, we'll simply use lands to get Tifa's power into commander damage range to one-shot our opponents. As a backup plan, we'll also include some other Landfall staples, alongside some protection spells to make sure Tifa stays around on the battlefield. With that, let's get into the card highlights. Since we're all about playing lands, we want to make sure we have enough good ramp to consistently get those landfall triggers for Tifa. Starting out, we have some of the best ramp spells for cases like this in Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, and Flare of Cultivation. All of these effectively do the same thing, letting us tutor up 2 basic lands, put one onto the battlefield and the other in our hand. At the very least, one of these cards can get us 2 landfall triggers in a turn, since one automatically goes down, and the other one can be used as the normal land drop for the turn if need be. Roiling Regrowth, Harrow, and Entish Restoration all have us sacrifice a land, but let us tutor up 2 basics and put them onto the battlefield for doing so. While Entish Restoration puts those lands onto the battlefield tapped, unlike the other 2, if we have a big enough creature, it'll get us 3 lands instead, potentially giving us a whopping 4 landfall triggers for Tifa. The most important part of these cards, however, is that they're instants, meaning they can be cast after blockers are declared. This lets you attack with a slightly smaller Tifa, potentially putting your opponents off guard, before springing the trap and killing your opponent with commander damage. Migration Path and Skyshroud Claim are similar to the previous cards, letting you get 2 lands from your library onto the battlefield. Skyshroud Claim is especially nice, since it puts the lands onto the battlefield untapped, letting you more easily cast another ramp spell afterwards. Open the Way has the potential to get you a whopping 4 lands if played in a full game, which can alone increase Tifa's power to 16, or even 32 if you could follow it up with a normal land drop, easily killing an opponent outright in most scenarios. Archdruid's Charm is a nice modular spell that can either act as a ramp spell, creature tutor, removal spell, or a fight spell. Honestly, this card is so versatile in a deck like this that it's likely going to be one of the best options for us in the entire deck. Sword of the Animist is a great way to passively boost Tifa's power, while also getting you a land before damage is even done, triggering Tifa's landfall while it's still relevant. Since we want to get as many lands out as possible in a single turn, we can use cards that let us simply play additional lands on our turns. Azusa Lost But Seeking lets us play an additional 2 lands, while Exploration lets us play a single additional land for a low cost of 1 mana. Oracle of Moldiah also only lets us play a single additional land, but lets us play lands from the top of our library, greatly helping us out if we don't have any in hand. To help increase Tifa's power even further, we can play spells that naturally buff her power. Since the higher her passive power is, the more that doubling it will do, this can be a great way to let us get into commander damage range without having to play so many lands in a single turn. Staff of Titania and Primal Bellow both give a creature +X+X, where X is the number of forests you control. In a mono green deck, forests are going to make up the vast majority of our land base, making these huge power increases later in the game. The staff takes this a step further, also giving us a 1/1 land creature whenever the equipped creature attacks. Not only does this increase the power the staff provides, it also triggers Tifa's landfall again, since a land will be entering when this goes off. Raised by Giants is a great way to passively make our Tifa a base 10/10, meaning even a single land entering will put her 1 power away from commander damage range. Bristly Bill, Spine Sower, and Will of the Sultai are both effective ways to get a ton of +1/+1 counters onto Tifa all at once. Bristly Bill even lets us consistently add more and more counters onto her, so long as we have the mana to pay for his ability, which shouldn't be too hard to do in such a land-focused deck. Will of the Sultai also lets us get back any lands from our graveyard to the battlefield, which can be very effective when combined with the ramp spells that force us to sacrifice a land to play. Since we're playing in a pseudo-Voltron style, Tifa's likely going to be heavily targeted by her opponents. Not only that, but her landfall ability also increases her power, not her toughness, meaning she'll be more susceptible to dying in combat. To help with both of these aspects, we have Tyvar's Stand, Tamiyo's Safekeeping, and Heroic Intervention, all of which give a creature hexproof and indestructible, or all creatures in the case of the intervention. Tyvar's Stand even temporarily increases the creature's power and toughness, depending on how much mana you pump into it, making it a great pre-combat cast to maximize Tifa's landfall ability. Blossoming Defense, Guardian Augmenter, and Snakeskin Veil only give the creature hexproof, but also buff the creature, again making for a potentially good play to use pre-combat or pre-targeted removal. Guardian Augmenter is especially nice, since it gives our Tifa a passive +2/+2 for as long as it stays out, making it much easier to abuse her landfall trigger to its full potential. Snakeskin Veil does something similar, giving a +1/+1 counter instead, which will persist for as long as Tifa remains on the battlefield. Gaia's Gift and Overprotect are kind of the best of both worlds type of cards, giving the targeted creature a power boost, hexproof, indestructible, a redundant trample in Tifa's case, and even reach when talking about the gift. You really can't go wrong with cards that give all these keywords and power boosts to a creature in a Voltron deck, especially for cheap and at instant speed. While Tifa is going to be our main win condition, we don't want her to be the only one. For backups, we have a number of other great cards that also have landfall triggers. In fact, I think focusing on landfall triggers that generate creature tokens is a great way to go about this, since it'll let us both go wide and tall, effectively utilizing both strategies at once. For this, we have Greensleeve's Morrow Sorcerer, Rampaging Baloths, and Titania Nature's Force, which create a 3/3, 4/4, and 5/3 respectively whenever a land enters. Titania does specifically state forests, which again shouldn't be an issue with this deck, but also lets us play them from the graveyard if need be. Scoot Swarm is kind of the quintessential landfall card, since it can generate a huge army of 1/1s very quickly. If left unchecked, Scoot Swarm can easily overwhelm and overrun your opponents. Zendikar's Royal is another great landfall card, creating a 2/2 elemental whenever one comes into play. The fact that this one is an enchantment, as opposed to creatures like the others, also helps, since it'll be harder to remove. For other landfall cards, we have Scythecat Cub, a great way to get +1/+1 counters onto Tifa, while also doubling them whenever the second land enters for a turn. We also have the Tireless duo, Tireless Tracker and Tireless Provisioner, which can generate us clues, treasures, and food whenever lands enter on our battlefield. The foods may sometimes be useful, but these really shine in the cases of treasures and clues, since being able to generate more mana and draw cards are pretty much the most powerful things you can do in Magic. Speaking of card draw, there are a few effects that work well with our Voltron or Tokens Go Wide themes. For Voltron, nothing is better in green than cards like Hunter's Insight, Rishkar's Expertise, and Soul's Majesty, which all effectively draw cards based on a creature's power, or in the case of Hunter's Insight, how much combat damage they deal. Since a huge theme of our deck is to make Tifa as large as possible with her landfall ability, these cards will be able to easily draw you 10 plus cards all at once, something that's going to be very important in a mono green deck. For the more go wide strategy, we have Toski, Bearer of Secrets, and Orin Frostfang, both creatures that draw you a card whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player. Since Tifa has Trample and is likely to deal some amount of damage to an opponent, she'll also be able to draw a card in most cases, but these really shine in go wide strategies, since each creature that hits an opponent lets you draw. Orin Frostfang is also a great blocker deterrent, since all of your attacking creatures will have Death Touch as well. For some good utility cards, we have Glamdring, an equipment that buffs the equipped creature, but more importantly, gives it First Strike. Since Tifa's toughness doesn't change, this First Strike will be crucial to make sure she survives in combat. It'll also let you recast some of our ramp spells, making for a very effective card overall. There's also Ram Through, a fight spell with a nice twist. Any excess damage done to the target creature will be done to the controller if the fighting creature has Trample. Since Tifa naturally has Trample, and this deck is all about making her as large as possible, this excess damage effect can potentially knock an opponent out of the game if their life is low enough, all without even needing to attack them. Scapeshift is a great way to get a ton of landfall triggers at once, since it lets you sacrifice any number of lands and then tutor and play the same amount. This card is almost certainly going to be a finishing piece, at least against one opponent, since Tifa will become massive after playing it. To help reduce the downside of sacrificing the lands, we also have Splendid Reclamation, which will return all lands from the graveyard to the battlefield, and Ancient Green Warden, which will let us play lands from the graveyard. The Green Warden even doubles landfall triggers, making it that much easier to get Tifa into commander damage range or create a huge army with the token generators. Here's an example deck list utilizing all the previously mentioned cards. Additional cards include more land ramp like Nissa's Pilgrimage and Sakura Tribe Elder, additional card draw in Harmonize and Garruk Primal Hunter, and a suite of green removal including Azuri's Predation and Broken Bond. Tifa happens to be one of my favorite characters from across all of the Final Fantasy games, so when I knew they were planning on making a set around them, I was excited to see what Tifa would do. And boy, was I not disappointed. The fact that she gets to double her power whenever a land enters, in green of all colors, is such a powerful ability that I expect people to be one-shotted by her very quickly in a lot of games. She does start at 1 power, meaning it'll take 5 lands in a turn to get her into commander damage range, but still, that's not hard to do in green at all. Throw in some temporary buffs or some things that add passive power to her, and it'll take even less lands to achieve this. There's so many ways to pump her power effectively, and even ways to protect her while doing so, that she's going to be very hard to stop. Now, the fact that her ability only doubles her power and not her toughness does mean that, in most cases, she's likely going to be dying in combat. But honestly, as long as you're waiting to attack with her when there are either no opposing creatures, or she's in commander damage range and can trample through, her dying doesn't matter that much. She's a base 2 mana, meaning even with commander attacks, it'll be easy to replay her again when needed, especially given how hard you'll be ramping while doing so. The only real downside, beyond that I can see, is that this deck will suffer from typical mono-green problems, such as not having the best creature removal, or card draw that doesn't rely on creatures in some aspect. But really, I think you'll be able to easily take out an opponent rather early on in nearly every game, reducing the pressure on you significantly. If large trampling creatures or ramping extremely hard in a game appeal to you, try Tifa out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how effective she can be. I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech on Tifa Lockhart. The full deck list outline in this video can be found at the Architect link at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.